Welcome back to another installment of Iron Rage, the show where John Romano and I vent our frustrations, aggravations, and anything on our mind that we want to get off. And you guys actually listen to it. Amazing. John, you were late today, and I want to hear your excuse. Do you have a note from your mother?
I want to ask you a question. Why is it when I'm at the grocery store and I get behind somebody with a WIC card, it either doesn't work or they're running some kind of fucking scam? It takes forever. Here's this guy. I think he was a freaking refugee. He looked like a terrorist. This white guy with a beard. All right. And he's got this portfolio full of fucking WIC shit. And he's got four. And had I paid attention to this and seen this getting into the line, I would never have gotten behind this guy. But I wasn't paying attention. I was making sure I had everything. And I was rushing because I know how to get here. And I go, oh, there's nobody in this line. This is why nobody was in this line. Because I got this guy in front of me. He's got four separate piles of shit, whole wheat, pasta and, Greek yogurt and, all this shit. And he's got these WIC stamps on top of each one. But they're like, it's like a check, and it's like from WIC. And you either have a WIC card. So I'm thinking, if you're on fucking food stamps, why do you want this big fucking to-do in front of everybody on the counter? Give me a fucking card, run it through like everybody else, swipe the card, and you go home. What do you got to do all this fucking paperwork for on the fucking belt?
Well, you would think this was the topic for today, but it's not. The topic for today is actually how recreational drug use has sidelined and maybe even ended the career and or life of pro bodybuilders or any bodybuilder out there. We hear this a lot, John. People succumbing to heroin overdoses, cocaine overdoses, GHB overdoses, alcohol overdoses. I mean, we've heard way too many of this in this industry. And, I wanted to just explore it a little bit because I know there's a lot of people. I have a very close friend of mine who battles with, heroin, addiction. And every once in a while he falls off the bandwagon, and it's just ruining his life. And I see this because I think bodybuilders are addictive personalities to begin with, and we could trace the roots back to where recreational drug use started in bodybuilding. I'm sure it started with back at Arnold's guys smoking a little weed, but then the Dan Duchesne era came about in the 90s, where he was basically put every bodybuilder on Bane. And, while Bane was not a super strong drug, it was an injectable form of, an opiate, essentially.
IV injectable.
Yeah.
Made it more sinister.
Yep.
Well, you could take it IM or sub-Q, but you got a better rush when you took it IV.
Yeah, no.
Well, Duchesne's mantra of the era was that there's no moral line between recreational drugs and performance-enhancing drugs. If you do drugs, you do drugs. It doesn't matter what they are.
Right.
It's just if your mindset is it's okay to do a drug, then it's okay to do Bane, it's okay to smoke marijuana, it's okay to do steroids, it's okay to do PCT. All of that self-medicating, ecstasy-taking personality issue is what it is. So if you're going to do drugs, you're going to do drugs. So quite naturally, bodybuilding, you accept the fact that you're going to do drugs, period,
right,
when you become a bodybuilder. So who better to become recreational drug users at the same time? Bane started because it was a painkiller.
Right.
And you take it before you train so you could train harder because it would hurt less.
Right.
And then, but of course, 4 hours later, you wanted to bang it again. And next thing you know, you're shoving Harleys up your veins. So,
well, you know what? Also, you got to remember, Duchesne, I don't know if you would say the term marketing is probably not good. He didn't market it, but he wrote about it as if it was an anti-catabolic drug. And I know that's how I rationalized using it back in the day. I said, well, if I take this, it's going to reduce cortisol output. I'm going to recover better, and I'm going to and I'll tell you one thing about Bane, and I'm not glamorizing it because it was a nightmare to get off it. But if you're dieting and you're hungry and you take a shot of Bane, the hunger goes away, and I think that's how a lot of bodybuilders got hooked on it.
Everything goes away. Well, there's two comments. It's not fair to lay the blame of Bane at the feet of Dan Duchesne without also describing at the same time the other drugs that he was bringing to the forefront. Nubane was just a discovery among the medical journals that, Duchesne was scouring at the time. He also found Torbugesic and Stadol and a few other analgesic painkillers that were, a substitute for Nubane. But he also found metformin and clenbuterol and GHB and all kinds of interesting drugs that many of which we still take today. Yeah. So he was playing around with insulin. He was one of the first guys to do that. He was one of the first guys to talk about growth hormone use that wasn't from cadavers. So I mean there were a lot of drugs in that dawn of the late 80s, early 90s, that dawn of the modern muscle movement, where a lot of new drugs came on, and that's when bodybuilding ostensibly changed. That's when when Arnold handed off his era, it was like the Arnold era, then the Haney era, and the Haney era was kind of like in between, and then Dorian came along and everything exploded. So pharmacology got really, really in vogue, and Duchesne and his discoveries were a necessity. Right. But going back to his mindset, if it's okay for you to do metformin, Torbugesic, clenbuterol, and steroids, then it's okay for you to shoot heroin and smoke weed, And Paul DeMeo, God rest his soul, great guy, good friend of ours, Quadzilla, the original, he got hooked on Nubane, and he graduated to heroin, and he eventually died of a heroin overdose.
Yeah.
You don't think bodybuilders doing that?
I don't know if you can verify this or not, but I knew from people who lived in Venice that there was a clinic there that all these guys would go to and say, oh, I have a pain in my shoulder, or I have a headache, and they would prescribe Nubane. And these guys would go in there and legally get Nubane with a prescription, because it was never a controlled substance. It's still not a controlled substance. And they called it the Nubane Clinic. Is that true?
Well, yeah. Well, it was more than that. I can't remember this doctor's name. He was a gay doctor, one of the first guys to start, battling, the AIDS epidemic, with the HIV epidemic with steroids. He also saw a lot of bodybuilders, and yeah, I mean, you got to remember at the time, late 80s, early 90s, the steroids weren't even, a scheduled substance yet. So, all these drugs that were moving around, they didn't have the nefarious label that they have on them now, but for being, included in these various control acts that are, Schedule 3 drugs, made them Schedule 3 drugs. So, back then, yeah, get Nubane. It helps you train, or it's anti-catabolic, or takes the pain away so you can train harder. Right. And this doctor would prescribe Nubane, steroids, anything you wanted. You just walked in and asked for it, and he wrote a script for it.
Did you have to pose for him and show him your glutes?
No, I didn't. No, but I'm sure that he had some arrangements. But unfortunately, he probably ended up showing his glutes because he got shut down, arrested, raided.
Oh, he did?
And all of that. So
surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
I mean, I know a lot of bodybuilders that did start with Nubane, and then they started trying stronger things, Ultrams, Percocets,
Oxys,
OxyContin. At the time, there was no Oxy; it was oxycodone. At the time, only they had. But and then obviously, you get addicted to that long enough, the high's not enough. It's too expensive. Those pills are really, really expensive, black market. And what they progress to is heroin. And nowadays, John, I see so many problems with heroin, and there's been a lot of heroin doses, because now what they're doing is they're cutting the heroin with what is it called? Phentermine.
Yes.
And phentermine is way stronger than heroin in the same dosage. You snort that and you die, basically. And so,
a friend of mine, a good friend of a good friend of mine, just died doing that.
Really?
About a month ago. Yep. He'd been in prison for a long time, and he had gotten out. He did like 17 years, and he was doing some skin pops in prison, a little bit of heroin, but it was his drug of choice on the outside before he went in, and he went back to doing it his second night out. He's in the halfway house, and they found him dead the next morning. Wow. He OD'd.
Wow. John, what advice would you, who lived a lot of life and experienced a lot of things, what would you give advice-wise if someone who's watching this show has a drug addiction, maybe is currently, doing drugs they shouldn't be doing right now, and, is a promising bodybuilder, does want to make a career of it. How do you break that cycle?
You have to realize it's a conscious choice, and your brain has to be strong enough. To be a bodybuilder, your body's got to be strong and your brain has got to be strong. You have to have a strong mind to be a bodybuilder, because there's temptations, and solutions to problems that are, not the best thing in the world for you to do. And you got to really be able to objectively take account of what's going on. And to make matters worse, you're a guy doing something like Trenbolone, which definitely has a psychological effect on you. If you're not aware of these psychological nuances and how they affect you, and wander into your life and all of a sudden have you doing and saying things that you normally wouldn't, you got to realize that and be able to control it. And that same control has got to be given towards the recreational drugs. Look, you put in a hard day, you worked out, you're really hard, you came home, you're exhausted, you ate your meal, you want to unwind and relax. Do you have a glass of wine or do you smoke a joint? I'm going to smoke weed, okay? That's no calories, nothing going on in my liver, everything is good. But if you express beyond that, and okay, so now it's a joint, and now you're going to do some hash with that, and then you're going to drop a couple Percocets, or you're going to do a Xanax bar, or you just keep piling the shit on. But then you realize, holy shit, what am I doing? I'm taking like 6 drugs a day, and you got to put the brakes on it. If you got to realize what you're doing is a conscious choice, and everything that you do as a bodybuilder, if you really are a bodybuilder, you should be prioritizing every step of the day to be towards becoming a better bodybuilder. And if you're polluting yourself with, undue toxic amounts of recreational drugs, you're taking away exponentially from that quest to be a bodybuilder, and you need to stop that. You need to get control of yourself and dedicate your brain like you dedicate it to doing those extra 5 reps that are almost impossible. You got to dedicate it to, putting a control limit on the other shit you're taking.
And John, that's very wise words, and I will take that one step further, because I know bodybuilders that use Adderall because they think that they can get more done in the course of a day. Adderall, they figure, well, if I could do a pre-workout and I could do 16 cups of coffee, why can't I take 1 Adderall? It's better for me, right? I only take it once a day and it's no big deal. But you know what? Adderall is another one of these drugs that can be a gateway drug to using, say, cocaine or crystal meth, or something that's cheaper and stronger. And I don't buy into that. First of all, stimulants are the worst drugs for bodybuilders to take, because they do raise cortisol very, very high. Okay, they stress the body out and they kill your appetite. So if you can't eat, you're not going to be a good bodybuilder.
They raid your adrenals too.
Yeah, because they overtax them. So, while the narcotic, or the opiates tend to relax a person, and I think that's why more bodybuilders tend to be attracted to those drugs as opposed to the stimulants. There's a lot of guys that are on tons of stimulants, and I know them, and they can't gain weight because of it, and they don't understand why, and their bodies are stressed out, and their blood work is coming back all messed up because of it. The bottom line here, people who are watching, okay, if you consider yourself a real bodybuilder, if you want to say, I want to be the best bodybuilder I can be, I want to be a pro someday, I want to be, revered and respected by the community, you can't do recreational drugs. You shouldn't even be doing pot or alcohol, okay? When I was training at my best and making my best gains, and I gained my 100 pounds of muscle in 5 years, I didn't do anything that I shouldn't. Only bodybuilding stuff. I trained, I ate, I slept, I took the right supplements, I focused. Obviously, I took bodybuilding, steroids and GH, but I didn't do anything recreational. I didn't go out, okay? I didn't party. You can't do that if you want to be the best there is. Talk to Ronnie Coleman, talk to Dorian Yates, talk to Jay Cutler or Phil Heath. These guys don't go out and party, okay? That's not happening, all right? Dorian Yates said in his London Real interview that he knew that he was as good as Lee Haney, because he said Lee Haney can't possibly be working any harder than I am, because it's impossible to work harder than I am. That's how dedicated he was to his trade.
Yeah. Don't follow Chris Cormier's lead.
No, he's a genetic freak, But think about how great he was. Dorian Yates used to say it all the time.
How about Cormier the night before the Olympia at Dre's in Vegas, dancing with his shirt off, whacked on whatever. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, the day before the Olympia.
Well,
But look, I've been with Craig Titus, King Kamali, tons of these guys rolling on ecstasy in the clubs, you know, and whatever. I mean, look, bodybuilders do recreational drugs. I agree with you that if you really want to focus on being a bodybuilder, you got to make every dedicated step of your day has to be geared towards being a bodybuilder. But at the end of the day, or at the end of the week or the month, I think it pays to blow off a little steam and you know, relax a little bit, and you know, in a controlled, limited, you know, environment. Right. So you know, if you want to, you know, smoke some weed, I find zero wrong with that. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, especially if you need to eat a lot, you know. So you know, alcohol, I would say is a far worse choice than, you know, marijuana. But, you know, if you need something to sleep or relax, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, I really don't. If it becomes a gateway, if it becomes a problem, or if you start eating brownies by the tray load with peanut butter on top and cream cheese, that sounds kind of good. But, you know, then it's a problem. But if it's not a problem and you can look, it all boils down to you. Can you manage your shit? If you can handle your shit, you got no problem. It's weak-minded people who can't control themselves that have problems. It's people who can't diet. It's just as, Dave, there's no difference between cheating on your diet and, you know, rolling up too many OxyContins. Right. There's no difference.
But there's also a certain subset of the population who are addicts, who have something chemically wrong in their brain that tells their body when they take one drink, they need 100 drinks. When they take one Percocet, they need the whole bottle. When they take one shot of heroin, they have to do it for the rest of their life, okay? So those people should never do drugs because they cannot. You know, go to AA, the first steps in AA. Talk to any person who's been in AA. You know, if you're an addict, you cannot use recreational drugs, period. You probably shouldn't use steroids, but you certainly cannot use mind-altering drugs like recreational drugs. And that's all there is to it. And you know what? I see so much talent out there in the bodybuilding world today. I don't want to see any more deaths. I don't want to hear about any more heroin overdoses. If you guys have problems and you know you're using drugs that you shouldn't use, you got to reach out for help, whether it be professionally, AA 6, whatever 12-step program. Reach out to a friend. I don't care. Email me. I get people who email me all the time asking me, what should I do? I'll give advice because I don't want to see any more casualties in our sport. It's pissing me off, and that's what today's rant was all about. So, guys, I hope you learned something. I hope you take what we say seriously because if you want to be the best bodybuilder, you can't be a drug addict. I'm Dave Palumbo with John Romano for another edition of Iron Rage.